So I think the most important thing to explain about a multi-day VWAP, or the concept of a VWAP that spans more than one day, would be to start with the kind of an intraday, a normal, typical volume weighted average price. What we're really trying to do is we're trying to figure out from the absolute start of the day going forward until the absolute end of the day, without respect for how many candles we're examining. Because that's not really our goal. We're not doing a periodic analysis over 20 candles previously or something like that. We're looking at the entirety of the day. We want a holistic benchmark, something that's going to judge all the trading of the day, not just the latest 20 or 50 or 90 or 200 candles. So we go back to the kind of main tenet that I always come back to, cumulative versus periodic. We simply could not be doing what we're about to be doing were it not for the cumulative nature of a VWAP. What that means is that we're going to give it a start point. In this case, for intraday VWAP, we start at the beginning of a day. We go all the way forward in time. And we accumulate all this data throughout the day. If we were doing periodic analysis, we'd have to start calculating over hundreds or thousands of bars to go backwards across multiple days. The problem with that is nobody wants to count, or even could or would take the time to count the appropriate number of bars backwards. So the fact that we can give a VWAP a starting point, and that's all we need to tell it, start from here and accumulate until I tell you to stop, or never, right? Just keep going. That's a really neat feature of VWAP that's very elegant for how we get to use it, rather than spending our time trying to calibrate or tweak it perfectly to the right number of bars. We're dealing with much more of a story-driven sense here, where we're looking for critical launch events. So the most critical one that we all use all the time with our intraday VWAP, of course, is the market open. But why do we stop the VWAP at the end of the day? I mean, there's a simple answer, which is we're really only trying to know about that one day at a time. It's sort of like asking someone, how was your day? You're not asking them, how was your week? You're asking them just about the current day that they're experiencing. And that's kind of what we've used so far with intraday VWAP. But what if, instead of the VWAP stopping at the end of the day, what if it continued onward into the future? So for example, this is what, Friday's trading from McDonald's, and here we are on Monday. What if we were to continue this volume weighted average price forward into the future? Now I've just hand drawn this in here. I have no reason to believe it's exactly that simple, but simply all I'm doing is I'm trying to express that there is a continuation of the calculation. So instead of just taking all the data from Friday and then stopping, we're going to continue on into the future indefinitely. So it's sort of like if we started a normal intraday VWAP and then just forgot to turn it off. It's like, have you ever fallen asleep with the television on? I know some people do that intentionally, right? But if you wake up in the morning, the TV's still blaring and you say, oh, I'm an idiot. I forgot to turn the TV off last night. That's like if someone forgot to turn off the VWAP and it continued accumulating data forever going forward. So when we think about a volume weighted average price, an analogy I think I've used before in the roadmap PDF or in my Chat with Traders interview, I know I've said it somewhere before, is that a volume weighted average price is kind of like a grade point average. It's cumulative, just like a grade point average, and it's weighted, just like a grade point average. It is more responsive to more significant classes you may take, and therefore grades you may receive. So in the same sense, a VWAP speeds up or slows down according to how much volume we're experiencing relative to the total volume for the day. So now if we think about the intraday VWAP as being one semester's GPA, one term, one period of analysis within your collegiate career, why couldn't we take a prior session or a prior semester and add those two together, appropriately averaging them to generate a total or cumulative GPA across the entire stretch over which we're examining this. Or let me say this another way. Each day is its own semester, right? So maybe this is your first semester freshman year. Here's your second semester freshman year. Here's your first semester sophomore year, second semester sophomore year. You see where I'm going with this. And there would be an overarching or overwhelming, here, let me get even a fatter marker to draw this, an overwhelming and overarching GPA that spans all of those individual units of time, all right? All those individual events that occurred, or really long stretches of time, several months over which you received many grades, but that factor into the bigger picture, which is your career GPA. So this, the phrase event-driven averages always comes back. We want to be launching these VWAPs from critical events going forward. You notice that when I had drawn this before, I had said, hey, here's our first semester of freshman year. We're not starting our GPA 2 semesters later and then going forward. We're starting from the beginning of that person's collegiate career. Similarly, if we were trying to measure something about a stock, how it's performed since a critical event, it wouldn't make any sense to start the VWAP before that event or after that event. Ideally, we'd want to start on that event itself. And this goes back to that cumulative elegance that I always talk about. We don't need to necessarily know how many bars ago that occurred. We just need to know the start for our VWAP, and all the calculation falls into place from there on out. One of the other benefits of being in a cumulative calculation rather than a periodic one is that we're not dealing with changing time frames. So when we go from a 15-minute chart to an hourly chart, we don't have to recalculate how many bars backwards we are looking. We're dealing with something that's a lot more intuitive, which is the kind of normal stretch of time and cumulative event planning. I shouldn't say maybe planning, but event analysis. So this goes back to, I'm sorry for those of you who have heard this so many times, but we don't speak in data, we speak in events. We say things like, how has your day been? Not, how have you been for the prior 172 minutes of this day? We don't do the kind of robotic data assessment that I think traditional technical analysis wants us to do. We tend to think, and I'm talking about in our lives, when we look at a stock chart, we tend to think from major events going forward. Now, these events can be calendar events, technical events, like a breakout or a gap. They can be fundamental events like earnings, a dividend, some corporate announcement. They can be geopolitical or macroeconomic in nature. So it could be industry-wide or sector-specific stuff. They could be legislative. There's all sorts of major events that can occur. I tend not to trade biopharmaceutical stocks, but FDA announcements, right? That would relate to the fundamental health of that company. So it's very, forgive me for overusing this word, intuitive, really is though, it's very accessible that we would want to launch a VWAP from a prior important day and then watch it walk forward, giving us potentially macro support and resistance in the same way that an intraday VWAP gives us micro support and resistance. The other beauty of this is we're going to be dealing with a familiar framework. We're going to be looking at a VWAP and deviation bands, two things we're pretty familiar with at this point, but much bigger than spanning just a single day.